Well, hi, my name is Elaine Glover and I'm the Bishop of the Cross-Denominational Mission. Now, I've been a Christian since I was 15. I fell away for 20 years and then came back to Christ, and ever since then, the Lord wrote his laws into my heart, and it's been a great journey. I've been to Baghdad with Canon Andrew White. I've looked after the judge who sentenced Saddam Hussein. I've been to Kenya for 4 years and became a missionary. And I've been a radio presenter. And a few years ago, I discovered that I'm Jewish. My family were the Zankas on my mother's side, and my great-grandmother was Charlotte Zanka, and her family came to Bilston in Leicestershire in 1700s. I think there was a big hoo-ha in Spain or the Spanish Armada, and they came to England looking for work. So anyway, I've been to Israel a few times, and since I've realised that I come from a Jewish family, I have been very interested in Judaism, and I don't see myself as like a denominational Christian. I believe that I'm a messianic follower of Yeshua. Anyway, it came to October the 7th, and I really found it greatly difficult and heart-rending to see what happened to the Jewish people on the kibbutz and the supernova on that day, and saw webcam, not from anybody else but Hamas. It was horrific. And, hearing about babies had their heads smashed on the walls, they burnt them alive. They slit open a pregnant woman's stomach and murdered the baby and the mother in front of her other children. They shot a daughter in front of the family. It was awful, gang rape women until their pelvis broke. And it was just horrendous. And I remember Shiloh Ben Hod from Shiloh Ministry talking about, as a believer, how when that happened, he and his wife just cried for 2 days at the atrocities of what Hamas and Gazan people had done. And I was the same, really. I've been to Israel numerous times. In fact, I was married there with my husband, Bishop Adrian of the OCAC. And we went with Christine Dog in the Armenian quarters and had it was the Seder meal of Yeshua. And, I know I've been in have Muslims friends, having been to Baghdad, and people in Portsmouth I know who are Muslims. So it's not that I'm Islamophobic, but to think about what they did to those people in the kibbutz, burning them on fire, throwing grenades in the safe rooms, and I just couldn't really. It was just awful. It was horrendous. It was a genocide. And I've heard Mossab Hassan Yosef talk about how he was the son of the founder of Hamas and how they whipped him when he was a young boy with an electric cable, and he was sort of told to hate Jews this and Jews that. And so really I had no sympathy at all about Gazans. And then you saw these children, and it was amazing because when you saw these children who had been killed by bombs from IDF, but it's war and these things happen in war. And the thing is, Hamas didn't even give their own people strong rooms or places to go to during the IDF when they were raining bombs down, trying to blow up the weapons that Hamas had hidden in mosques, schools and hospitals. And I saw on the YouTube that the UN had taken, I'm not saying all the UN, but there were certain people from the UN who had given Hamas their vans, because you could see UN on the top, and given them buildings to hide the hostages. And also, what really disturbed me was the way that they put on the back of a truck this young German girl who was murdered by Hamas. And she was more or less naked, and they were spitting at her, abusing her body as they went through Gaza. And there was an old lady who looked like she had dementia, and she was on the back of a truck. She didn't know what was going on. And it was horrific. I mean, if it was the other way around, it'd be terrible. But because it's seemingly the Jewish people, Israelis, people were just jumping up and down for glee, and they had this big screen where they could see what was going on, and Jewish people being murdered, people being raped, and they're all jumping up and down saying Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. Well, anyway, fast forward. I just felt that me and Adrian had to go to Jerusalem, so I booked a holiday. And it was at a time when my husband was in a crucial state of what he does for work. Plus he had a synod with OCAC in a few weeks after. And I'd been doing a project with Kinder Transport. And so I booked this hotel, and it was St. George's Cathedral. And it was in a part with a lot of Palestinian. And I heard that St. George's Cathedral was very pro-Palestinian. So I just went in faith. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just know the Lord wanted us to go. And when we got there, I was really concerned about, were we going to be abducted by the taxi driver and taken off to Hamas and kept hostage. All these things go through your mind. So anyway, when we arrived, you've been on this long journey because you've got to go all the way to Luton and then go on the plane to get to Jerusalem. And it was all, it was quite an anticipation of what was going to happen. So you got in the taxi, and the man said he's a Muslim. I'm thinking, what am I going to say? So I just said, and it's true, in England, people live, there's lots of Muslims in England. There's a lot of Muslims in England. And they're not all migrants either. People have lived there for years, and we've had to live alongside them. And, I know people who are Muslim. Have never really been any problem, really. So I was thinking, praying, I hope we get to Jerusalem. And we did. We got to Jerusalem. And so anyway, we slept for a long time because we were very tired, having been busy in a long journey. And the following day, on the Nablus Road, I just kept saying to these young people, hi, all right, hello, just smiling at them, and they smiled back. And we went to this Palestinian Muslim hotel. I had a nice drink, and people were very friendly, and we saw some imams who were there, and they were very, very friendly. I've never really experienced that before. And we've been in shops, and I say thank you very much for what you do. Really being nice and, hospitable and generous, and they were as well. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I didn't really want to be into politics and row with people and go on about October the 7th. I mean, I just didn't want to get involved with that. And the people that worked at the hotel never mentioned politics. Never, you might have said, well, these... I do find, and I understood later on, I did find that the Arabs are very friendly, but Jewish people didn't really speak very much. And some people said it's because they were traumatised. But actually I realised they didn't know my language. That's what that was about. They didn't know what I was saying. And, because I was thinking, they think they're better than me, Mardy me. But then when I saw that actually these people didn't know my language, and some of the security guards were saying, where's the King of Kings church? Because you go in an elevator to it, and they didn't know what I was talking about. So at the end of 2 weeks, I kind of warmed to everybody and stuff. But what really overwhelmed me, and this is what my message is really, is that in reality, Jerusalem is a place where people live together, Muslims, Jews, Arabs, because I know there are quite a few Christian Arabs who are quite, like the very Roman Catholic or Orthodox. But generally, they all seem to live together. And what really struck me was all this, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free and everything else like that. All these people are doing is causing basically no tourists to go to Jerusalem. And so all these Arabs are losing jobs, losing their businesses because there's just no tourists. I mean, I've been down, it's like a street, I don't know what it's called, from Jaffa Gate down to the very bottom, which is virtually Damascus Gate. And there's, where all these markets are, and there's just nobody because there's no tourists. I was absolutely gobsmacked. And this is the problem. This is the problem. All this negativity of the BBC, negativity with these pro-Palestinian marches, what they're doing is causing loss of business to the people that they're supposed to be marching for. Because they'd lost all their businesses and there was just nobody in the market, very few. I've been before and it's hugely hustle and bustle. You've got loads of tourists going one way towards the Holy Sepulchre and tourists coming the other way. And there's no room to move or talk and, you can go and barter in shops, but there's just totally no tourists at all, especially from England and Europe. There's quite a few from these far off Polynesia or places like that, but there's very, if nobody, tourists from England. And we went, the hotel that we were in were very basic food, and what we like to go into have a swimming pool. So we went weekend to another hotel across the way from St. George's, and we met this Jewish lady from England, and she was in tears, and she said, "You know what? I never thought I would see a British tourist again, never, because we thought that you hate us." And I was gobsmacked because that's quite far from the truth in Dorset, because many people in Dorset are very pro-Jewish, are very pro-Israel. A lot of Christians are anyway. I mean, you still get all these silly marches from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And then the Arab market trader said to me, "We never thought we'd see another British person again." They were shocked. And so, it's not just all this propaganda is not just affecting us, but it's affecting people in Jerusalem. They're losing jobs left, right and centre. And they said to me all they wanted was to be able to feed their kids, go to work, feed the kids, go to school and live a life. They weren't interested in politics. And I've known that when I went to Baghdad with Canon Andrew White and when I lived in Belfast, that people, really normal people, just want to get on with their life. They're not interested with terrorism or they're not interested with politics. Obviously we all have our own opinions, and obviously there are times in places like Jerusalem where there might be skirmishes at Damascus Gate or a bit of aggravation on Jerusalem Day when they go to where the Wailing Wall is above there, where the mosque is, and they go there on Jerusalem Day. I mean, every now and again there are skirmishes, but basically, as a whole, people just don't want to be getting involved with all this. They want business, they want to have tourism, because that's what they live for. So anyway, it was amazing, really, the next bit, because I had asked this lady that knits toys, I don't know why, but I just said, "Can you knit me a Jesus?" And the disciples, these little dolls, they knit them And like summertime, they make dolls and put ice creams in their hand or little glasses, and the money that they make, they give it to charity. So I gave them to a pastor who has a church in the old city, and they said, did we want to go and see some Gazan people? We could go and pray with them. And I said, yes. Well, because, when you're there, it's a completely different story. And God was really softening my heart. And I'd never thought in a million years after October the 7th that I'd want to go and see Gazan people. But so anyway, I only thought there were 2 people, but in fact, there were 50 odd people. In fact, I didn't know until I got there. There was another place with 50 more Gazan people who had been to Israel for operations, and they couldn't go back because after the war they got nowhere to go back to. So we then went and I bought 50 boxes of chocolates from a Palestinian shop, and he didn't know English, and I said I want 50, and he thought I was trying to bargain with him. I said no, I want 50 boxes of chocolates, and he thought I said 15. And when he realised that was 2,000 shekels, it's a lot of money, wasn't it, really? Even more than I thought. But we bought them, and we bought 50 holding crosses from St. George's jewellery shop. And we didn't know where we were going. We didn't know who was coming with us other than he was a Muslim convert to Christianity. But thinking about it, if his family knew that he was a Christian, he could be killed. And I was saying, Lord, we really need to have this, we need a taxi driver who can speak English, because I don't know how we're going to cope without a translator. Well, we met this guy called Charlie, who was a taxi driver, who was a converted Muslim to Christianity, and he said he would go. So the man came when we prayed, and then Charlie came, and then we went off to see these Gazans. And I said, you're Muslims, I'm a Christian, but I've come to share the love of God. And they loved the chocolates, and they loved the holding crosses. They perhaps, not all of them took one, but some of them were given the choice if they wanted one. When you're poorly and you're holding a holding cross, it does make you feel better, because we're thinking about Yeshua, who died for us on a cross, but he was crucified and he bore our sin and paid the price of all the things that we do wrong that we could never do. But he didn't just die, but he conquered the grave by raising on the 3rd day. And we washed in his blood, and, his body was broken for us. This is what I was... But obviously I was a bit limited because I couldn't speak the language. But everybody was really happy. And that was wonderful. And, I'd never thought in a million years, but God changes your thought pattern, because the problem is, on the media, we can be told such a lot of codswallop, and we can be made to think one way when in reality it's not like that at all. So we went to Magon David Adom as well, the ambulance service, and that was fantastic because we saw what they did, and we heard a man who was a young man on the day of the October the 7th, and he was saying on this particular thing, oh, Dad, I love you. Tell Mum I love you. And the father wasn't knowing what was going on. All of a sudden you heard, and there was silence. They'd been killed. And then this young child was in a cupboard, and he didn't know what to do. Hamas had killed his mother and father, and it was terrible, and in the end they were alive because they stayed in the cupboard until they knew they were safe, and a family member came to rescue them. But it really opened my eyes to reality. But I've always known that, having been to Belfast, the same thing. Normal people aren't bothered with politics, just want to get on with their own life. And Satan comes to rob, steal, kill and destroy and change your mindset. But the message is here today. Do not judge anybody. Let God do the judging. You can do the loving and God can do the judging. We have to be wise, because I did pray for safety and I did feel that the Lord was with us, because, problem is, in a place like that, you don't know what could happen, so you need wisdom. But God really showed me that we need to do the loving and he does the judging. We've got to be very keen and careful and wise, but we need to trust in him and to love your enemies and to love people because they're no different to us. We only saw these Gazan people for a short space of time, but I'm so glad I did, because God taught me huge lessons about not judging people, but to let him judge and let him love people through us and our actions. Amen.